What would you do if you realized the person next to you on the plane was trying to ignite a bomb hidden in their shoe? That's the nightmare passengers on Flight 63 faced, turning a transatlantic flight into a harrowing tale of courage and survival. Flight 63 was bustling. The pre-Christmas rush filled the cabin with a low hum of anticipation. Families, laden with oversized bags stuffed with gifts, jostled for overhead bin space. A young couple, Sarah and Mark, fresh from their wedding, giggled, still giddy with honeymoon bliss. Further down the aisle, Mr. Henderson, a businessman with a perpetually furrowed brow, tapped impatiently on his laptop, already mentally preparing for the meetings that awaited him back home. Across from him, Mrs. O'Malley, her silver hair neatly coiffed, clutched a worn photo of her grandchildren, a soft smile gracing her lips. It was, in every way, a typical transatlantic flight. Hermes Marder, a flight attendant with a decade of experience, moved through the cabin with practiced grace. Her smile was genuine, her eyes sharp, taking in the small details, a child's dropped toy, a passenger struggling with a seatbelt. Tonight she was thinking about her own family's Christmas Eve traditions, a warm counterpoint to the sterile environment of the aircraft. She greeted passengers, offered assistance, her movements efficient and reassuring. Years of training had honed her ability to observe, to sense when something was amiss, a skill that was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. As the Boeing 767 leveled off at cruising altitude, a faint, acrid smell, barely perceptible, began to weave its way through the recycled air. Hermes, pouring coffee for a passenger, caught a whiff. It wasn't the usual stale coffee or the faint scent of jet fuel. This was different, sharper, with a hint of something chemical. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. She dismissed it, momentarily. Probably just something spilled in the galley, she reasoned. But the seed of unease had been planted. Richard Reed sat rigidly in seat 39A, his gaze fixed on the window, though he saw nothing of the darkening sky outside. He was a tall man, his frame almost awkwardly filling the cramped economy seat. His clothes, dark and nondescript, seemed slightly too large for him, as if he were trying to disappear within them. He hadn't spoken a word to anyone since boarding, his eyes darting nervously around the cabin, avoiding direct contact. He clutched a small, worn-out bag in his lap, his knuckles white. Hermes, making her rounds, noticed Reed. His stillness was unsettling in the midst of the general activity of the flight. The faint smell seemed stronger near him. She approached, her voice professionally polite. "Sir, is everything all right? Can I get you anything?" Reed started, his eyes widening slightly. He nodded curtly, muttering a barely audible, "I'm fine." He quickly averted his gaze, returning to his fixed stare out the window. But Hermes noticed the slight tremor in his hand, the sheen of sweat on his forehead. Something was off. Her internal alarm, honed by years of experience, began to sound a quiet warning. She moved on, but the feeling of unease persisted. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching the tension tighter. Hermes continued her duties, serving drinks, collecting trash, but her gaze kept returning to Reed. She saw a woman in the row behind him lean over to her husband and whisper, "That man is giving me the creeps. He's been acting strange ever since we took off." The whispered comment solidified Hermes's growing suspicion. This wasn't just a nervous flyer. This was something else. Hermes saw it. Reed, hunched over, his hands moving furtively in his lap. A small, orange flame flickered. The acrid smell intensified, now carrying the unmistakable scent of sulfur. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. The flick of the match, the glint of something metallic in his lap, the chilling realization. It can't be. But it was. Her heart hammered against her ribs, adrenaline flooding her system. Fear was there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective instinct. She had to act. Now. "Sir! Stop! What are you doing?" Her voice was sharp, cutting through the hum of the cabin. Reed looked up, his eyes filled with a chilling mixture of desperation and fanaticism. He lunged, a guttural cry escaping his lips. And then Hermes saw it clearly, the shoe, resting on his lap, wires protruding from it, a makeshift fuse leading to a small, blackened area where he'd been striking the match. A bomb. Chaos erupted. Screams ripped through the cabin, a wave of pure terror washing over the passengers. Sarah and Mark clutched each other, their honeymoon dreams dissolving into a nightmare. Mr. Henderson instinctively shielded his face with his laptop, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Mrs. O'Malley sat frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief, the photo of her grandchildren slipping from her grasp. Marder didn't hesitate. She threw herself at Reed, her training kicking in. She had to stop him, whatever the cost. She grabbed his arm, trying to wrestle the shoe away, her mind racing, desperately trying to remember the emergency procedures, the training, anything that could help. Help! He's got a bomb! Marder's shout was a desperate plea, a rallying cry. Christina Jones, a younger flight attendant, petite but fiercely determined, reacted instantly. She didn't think, she just acted, launching herself at Reed from the opposite side of the aisle. The passengers, initially paralyzed by fear, began to mobilize. A wave of collective courage surged through the cabin. It was raw, instinctive, the primal urge to survive. A large man in a rugby shirt threw a blanket over Reed's head, momentarily blinding him. A woman, fueled by adrenaline, grabbed his other arm, trying to pin him down. Mr. Henderson, shedding his corporate persona, swung his briefcase, aiming for Reed's head. Sarah and Mark, their fear momentarily forgotten, worked together, trying to reach the tangled mess of wires and cords. Reed, however, was a formidable opponent. His 6 feet 4 inches frame and over 200 pounds were fueled by a desperate, fanatical energy. He fought back with a savage intensity, kicking, punching, his eyes wild with a chilling determination. The narrow aisle became a battleground, a chaotic tangle of bodies, screams, and desperate struggles. "Get his hands!" someone shouted. Someone produced a pair of headphones, the cord quickly wrapped around Reed's wrists. Another passenger grabbed a seatbelt extension, attempting to bind his legs. A flight attendant, remembering a pair of plastic cuffs used for unruly passengers, desperately fumbled for them in a storage compartment. The improvisation was frantic, desperate, a testament to the human will to survive. "I won't let you do this!" Marder gasped, her voice strained, her grip tightening on Reed's arm. She could feel the heat from the shoe, the terrifying proximity of the explosives. "We have to stop him before," Jones panted, her face contorted with effort, her small frame straining against Reed's strength. A brief, terrifying thought flashed through Mr. Henderson's mind. Is this it? Is this how it ends? But the thought was quickly replaced by a surge of adrenaline, a fierce determination to protect his fellow passengers. "This is the captain. We have a situation on board. We are diverting to Boston's Logan International Airport. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of the flight crew." The pilot's voice, calm and controlled, cut through the chaos. It was a voice of authority, a beacon of hope in the midst of the terror. The announcement was met with a mixture of fear and relief. The diversion meant they were no longer flying over the ocean, but it also meant the danger was immediate. Outside, the passengers could see the flashing lights of fighter jets, escorting the plane, a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. The roar of their engines added another layer of tension to the already fraught atmosphere. The descent was agonizingly slow. Every bump, every shift in altitude, sent a fresh wave of fear through the cabin. Finally, the wheels touched down, a jarring thud that was met with a collective gasp of relief. Almost instantly, the plane was swarmed by authorities. FBI agents, police officers, bomb squads, all moving with a swift, practiced efficiency. Reed, subdued but still defiant, was quickly dragged from the plane, his face contorted in a snarl. The passengers, shaken but alive, began to disembark. Some were weeping, others were silent, their faces pale with shock. Medical personnel were on hand to treat the injured, offering blankets and reassurance. The scene was a chaotic mix of flashing lights, shouted orders, and the hushed whispers of traumatized passengers. The world's media descended upon Logan Airport, their cameras capturing the unfolding drama. The shoe bomber became an instant headline, a chilling symbol of a new and terrifying form of terrorism. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, the world changed. Airport security was irrevocably altered. Shoes were now routinely removed and scanned. Liquids were restricted. The seemingly simple act of boarding a plane became a complex and often frustrating ritual of security checks. But the true impact of Flight 63 was felt most deeply by those who had been on board. The passengers and crew carried the scars of that day, the memory of the terror, the knowledge of how close they had come to disaster. But they also carried something else, the memory of the courage, the resilience, the extraordinary acts of bravery that had saved them. Hermes Marder, hailed as a hero, often reflected on that day. The fear, the adrenaline, the desperate fight, it was all etched in her memory. But what she remembered most was the collective spirit, the way ordinary people had risen to the occasion, putting their own lives at risk to save others. It was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable terror, hope and courage could prevail. The simple act of removing shoes at the airport, a constant reminder of that fateful day, became, for her and countless others, a small price to pay for safety and a powerful symbol of the enduring fight against terror.